I'm greener than you. Your behavior is not responsible. Being green has become a way of kind of beating people down, looking down on people. I don't like that approach. We need to democratize this, not make it elitist. But when we think we are better than other people because we've made a better choice, this sows division, not democratization. And I think it's a massive, massive issue. But I think to understand that whilst business has created most of the world's problems, it's going to be the thing that fixes them. That's a really contentious thing to say, but I am going to say that. No one's died yet. And then I say, okay, so my nan's 93. Do you want me to volunteer her? If we have a death, will that help? That would help. That would help. Brilliant. The Highways Department conundrum with climate change. We're going to need to see that it's too late before we do something too late. It's a really good question. Shein are fascinating and dreadful and amazing and frightening and ubiquitous. So if there was an opportunity to work with someone like Shein, let's Sorry, I've just realised my cat has just dropped a dead mole through the cat flap. I'd rather be woke than be a twat. Excuse my swearing.
Just one quick thing before we get into the episode. This podcast is brought to you by Ecology, the UK's most trusted climate action platform. They help businesses to reduce their emissions, restore our planet, and report their progress for every step of their climate journey. If you'd like to learn more, check them out with the link in the show notes. Let's get on with the episode. Mark, Shayler, thank you very much for joining me on the Climate Unfuck podcast.
Rob, you're so welcome, because if we've got to unfuck anything, it's got to be climate.
Yes, agreed. I'd like to start by asking, you do a lot of things, and all of which are very interesting, but how would you explain what you do to a 7-year-old?
It's a really good question, this is, because it has changed. So I came up with a unifier. I went for a dinner with a really good friend who said, I never know what you do, just tell me what you do. And I started to tell him. And he went, whoa, you've thrown about 8 balls at me and I've only got 2 hands. And I thought, that's a brilliant analogy. So I am an environmental consultant. That's where I started. And everything I do has purpose riven through it, like the word Blackpool through a stick of rock. Over the last 35 years of me working, I have got into other areas. So 70% is sustainability. 70% is all around how we make businesses perform better, perform with less impact, and create a world that we all want to live in rather than one that we want to run away from. That's 60 to 70% of what I do. But I was brought into innovation projects as the sustainability voice. Now, right there is a problem that it's not embedded or baked in, it's added on, zipped it over. So I was brought into innovation projects as that voice, and I'm watching the way that innovation projects work and the level of thinking involved in that. And I was left wondering how we could make all that better. So I thought I'd have a go. So I started doing innovation work. 90% of that innovation work has sustainability at its core. 10% of it doesn't. We can talk a bit about that in a minute. And that got quite a lot of traction. I did quite well in that. And we ran a lot of innovation projects that were really, really broad. Then, of course, when you've done your innovation project and you've done your sustainability strategy and it comes to talking about it, you need to do that really carefully because we've gone from, greenwashing to green cocking, which is peacocking and greenwashing mixed together, which is a dear friend of mine.
It's a very good word.
Yeah, it's her portmanteau, and I absolutely love it. Claire is an absolute diamond. But we've now moved into green hushing, and I want us to move into kind of reclaiming this, unifying ecology and economy, because they're the same. They come from the same word, the Greek word oikos, meaning home. And we've clefted them and put them in opposition to each other. But there is no economy without ecology, and there is no ecology if we don't change the way we work our economy. So sustainability runs through a lot of the work that I do in terms of innovation. But when it comes to explaining that, when it comes to not falling foul of the Advertising Standards Authority, who are really hot, who'd have thought they'd be the biggest environmental police around? You have to be science-based. And as a scientist, I'm wholeheartedly in favor of being science-based. So I also get used to moderate the enthusic and sometimes misleading language of marketing and bring it back. And that's where most of the kind of conflict in my work comes from, is when I'm trying to simplify the complex and they want me to turn it into 2 words and it needs to be 5 words. That's where most conflict comes from. So I work with companies to help them become more efficient with less damaging. I then help them become better companies in terms of their innovation process and creativity and culture. And then I help them explain that to the market in a way that isn't illegal.
I was looking in prep for this call at the kinds of companies you work with. And there's a lot that most people would recognize. Could you just give a flavor of the kinds of companies you work with?
Yeah, I do. I can. So I work with, I work across the spectrum. So I've worked a lot with small businesses, small manufacturing companies. My first 6 years were spent working in West Yorkshire in a city called Bradford, working with really tiny companies, paid for by the local authority, really forward-thinking boss, guy called Dilana, and a really forward-thinking council would pay me to go and deliver free environmental support to really small manufacturing businesses. So I spent my first 6 years in printing and packaging, in textiles, in engineering. So I realized that no matter what that business did, they were full of really good people that wanted to do better. The bit that was missing for them was an awareness of how to do better. So I learned that enterprise is good. Whilst business has created most of the world's problems, it's one of the only things that can fix them. So with that in mind, when I went to work for larger organizations, I thought to myself, I'm not going to shy away from difficult, damaging, in inverted commas, companies. I'm going to work out how we can make them better. So some of my clients are names that you wouldn't put on the side of the coin that was pro-kindness or pro-sustainability, but they're full of people who are. So I've worked with everyone from Coca-Cola, Unilever, Procter and Gamble. I've worked with those companies that often get a bad rap for what they do. I don't help them sell more things badly. I only do good pieces of work with them. However, as brands, I can understand why people would think twice about working with them. What I've found is work there has been the most yielding. They've given us the most yield, has produced the greatest results. So I don't say no to anybody. There probably are a couple that I wouldn't want to work with. But on the whole, I don't say no to anybody. But I will say no to projects, even for companies that are glossy and appealing from a green perspective. If the project isn't doing a good thing, I'm not interested. So it's project level that I have an issue with rather than company level.
When you say yields, that you use that word as how you're judging it. How do you choose if a really bad company, in inverted commas, comes to you and says, we want to do this project? How are you judging whether it's worth taking on and you mentioned yield?
Yeah, so I'm really interested in how much carbon it's going to save. I'm really interested in how many mines it can change, and I'm really interested in how much waste it reduces. And carbon, and that's the order. Carbon is the most important metric that we've got, and I know that angers so many people. We can talk about this in a minute. That angers so many people, but it's really important to recognize that. So, if there's a mass balance in favor of reduced carbon or impacts upon human health that are positive, I'll do the work. I'll jump in and do that work.
And are there questions that because I would have thought that this requires wrestling with quite difficult questions yourself. What questions around this do you find the trickiest to wrestle with?
Yeah, for certain. When you've got no work on and you get offered a contract from a company that maybe you're not aligned with, or a project that you're not aligned with, that's really difficult because you have to feed your kids, or in my case, kids and grandkids, and and consequently, that does create turmoil, internal turmoil. I've not had to do anything that I'm not aligned with yet, but I'm acknowledging that is a potential reality it is for many people, and it is for me. So it asks the question to ask myself is, if I was to put the name of that company on my introduction slide in talks, would I be embarrassed explaining what I did for them? And if the answer is no, that's an interesting thing. But that's an easier decision than the project-based decision. Did that project do good? That's way that is where I'm really excited. Am I going to be working with some? So for Coca-Cola, for example, I've done some really interesting work with them on health drinks, looking at moving them away from what they do now, because they only make the syrup, right? They don't put it into bottles and send it around the world. That's Coca-Cola Enterprises, two separate companies. I don't work with Coca-Cola Enterprises. I'm not saying I wouldn't. I just haven't. But Coca-Cola themselves, when we think about the science and the technology and the chemistry and how they use it, and then how they could use it, that closing that gap really excites me. So we've done some work with them on brain health, gut health. We've done some work with them on reducing sugar. I've done nothing on sustainability in terms of carbon or in terms of waste or any of those things. That's not where I've been engaged with them. And it was a really difficult decision, but it wasn't, because I've been working with amazing people that really want to shift that business into a future that hasn't arrived yet. And that to me is enough to make me go, okay, there's something here. Plus the briefs were brilliant. Each of the projects I've done, one wasn't aligned necessarily with a better social or environmental outcome, but it was a really exciting project in as much as they let me change the recipe, the brand, and the packaging. And that was a new mixers project, so moving them into an alcohol mixer category. And we put it in glass bottles. We changed the color of the branding from red to black, and we were allowed to play with the recipe and change the recipe. That's just a gift. Like, that's an amazing opportunity. So I did the right project for the wrong reasons, probably, with that one.
Yeah. What are some projects that can you talk about projects you've said no to?
I
Not
can't talk
necessarily
about
with
for obvious reasons. I
Coca-Cola.
can't talk about
Yeah.
projects I've said no to. And there are projects that I've said no to, and that's when there's been. Well, I can talk about one. So one of them was working with a massive global fishing, Russian-owned fishing fleet, and I just looked at their practices. And look, if you care about the oceans, the order of challenge to the oceans is firstly climate change with its associated impact of ocean acidification. Then it's overfishing and the way we overfish, bottom dredging. Then it's animal agriculture runoff, chemical runoff, fish bycatch, and then fishing waste disposal. And then it's consumer-based plastics, which are massively important, but it's like it's down the chain. This one was at the second layer of that. It was a company that were not fishing in a responsible way, so it was really easy. It was just, and I met them, and I just immediately went, absolutely not. You just knew. I knew straight away, and so did they. They would not have used.
Yeah. What like you're going into, I think it's really interesting because you've got an inside perspective on companies that people from the outside would judge to be not one that they would maybe buy from. I'm not saying, say, Coca-Cola, but
Yeah.
and like from what you've seen from the inside, you said about good people doing good things. Does that ever feel like it's at odds with like you can have a good person doing a good thing, but if the company as a whole, or the way that the company is run, or even a publicly owned company that's kind of beholden to kind of quarterly reporting, does it ever feel like there's a tension between who you're working with directly and like the beast as a whole?
Always. Absolutely. And you've just touched on two topics that we think we should go into, which is quarterly reporting, and I would also say shareholder. Yes, absolutely. It's not easy to sit down with a company that people are boycotting, actively boycotting, because of whatever their stance on climate or plastic or whatever. But how are we going to change the world? It would take about 40% of their customers to boycott them before they changed. Or it takes me standing up inside the boardroom saying, you cannot carry on growing by damaging the planet. And I do say those things. You cannot carry on growing by making people ill. I am brave and I say those things. So I have to make a decision, and there's no metric to help me with this, Rob. I have to go, am I doing more good than harm? Am I changing their trajectory, even by half a degree? And if I can say yes, then I'll consider doing that work. And it has to be the right project and et cetera, all of those things. And it has to be the right people. So I've worked with some companies that would not be on the big list of companies that many ethical consumers, I struggle with those words completely, would avoid. But the person that I was working with was so utterly unpleasant, and the profit margins of that company were so astronomical that I just went, I'm not doing this. This is not where I want to be. So I have to treat it on a case by case basis. And I'm brave. I'll go in and talk to those companies that other people don't like, and I'll try and change them. If I can't, I won't do the work.
Can I throw you a hypothetical? I heard you on a podcast say that you'd be interested to talk to Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba.
Yeah.
But if you say could design your kind of project in Shein, what project would you want to work on, and who would you work on it with? And would you, I guess, before those questions, why would you choose or not choose to take the work in the first place?
It's a really good question. Shein are fascinating and dreadful and amazing and frightening and ubiquitous. So if there was an opportunity to work with someone like Shein, let's just boil down what they actually do, okay? They are a logistics company. They're about trends. They know what's coming. They're thieves. They steal designs. Everyone does. I'm not just knocking them. And they are able to mobilize a supply chain like that to be able to fulfill a consumer need, to actually generate that consumer need in the first place. Let's not negate that part of the economy. They actually generate demand. To then get product from the raw material stage to the customer really quickly. Let's think about the strengths of that. Insight, speed of manufacture, speed of delivery, customer satisfaction, and customer understanding. And then we say, how can we use those skills to do something good? They're a long way from doing something good, by the way. I'm not knocking them, but they are in a particular business model, which is about volume, and change. Now, imagine for them, we could change the way they sourced cotton, so it was all regenerative and all organic. They're so big, the price difference would be significant, but insignificant. It would be a tiny 2%. Imagine if we could get them to power a regenerative or a circular economy in polyester. And I appreciate some people do not want polyester on their body. And I'm much more concerned about microplastics in the body than I am anywhere else on the planet, by the way. But imagine if we could re-engineer that supply chain so it was, I don't know, 300% better. That would be the kind of project I'd want to work on with them. The challenge and the rub here, Robin, you're right to ask this question, is that they'll still want to sell more of the good stuff than the world can manage. So how we make more money from selling less stuff or from selling fewer fresh new atoms, that's the big challenge that we face. And they have an important role in the latter part of that sentence. More money from fewer, more circular atoms. That will be where I would focus with them. And I'd have to obviously have the conversation about, I won't say degrowth, because the words degrowth I don't think they do us any favors. I think they're too scary for many businesses, but I think we need to look at what makes us happy. We each buy 2.5 pairs of jeans on average a year, right? We each own something in the region of 8 to 9 pairs of jeans. No one needs that many jeans. No one. We're no happier when we buy our 10th pair of jeans. No happier at all. We're really happy when we buy the right pair of jeans. So there's
Mm,
something around removing changing the relationship between consumption and happiness, using shopping as an antidepressant, using shopping as social cohesion. That's mainly why we shop now. There is some elevation. And when you think about it, when you think about Shein, right? Not just Shein, Temu, when you think about these companies, I see so many people out, and it's Christmas party season, right? We're recording this in December, and it's Christmas party season in London. And I'm watching people go out, and you can still see the tags on their clothes that have popped out the back because you know full well they're going back. They're not leasing them; they're borrowing them. Imagine if
mm.
we could add, I don't know, a £2 charge so that was leased legitimately. They're really good at getting product out and product back. Let's do this properly.
At what point, if you mentioned about Sheen, and I really appreciate you breaking it down, like the things that you would change, but at what point do you have to say that this thing would change so far beyond recognition of what it currently is, that what it currently is, like, because I've spoken to some people and they would say that either it should be like the regulation should mean that Sheen shouldn't exist, for example, or that like it shouldn't have been started in the first place. But this is kind of more, I think it's more realistic, but it's more like, I think a lot of things have to change. Do you ever feel like you work with a business, or there are businesses that other businesses in the world, that if you worked with them, for them to actually have the impacts that they need to in order for the world that we need to materialize, they would change so far beyond recognition that they would be a completely different company?
For certain, and that's what they have to do. And we've seen this already. There's so many companies that started out doing one thing and now do something else, and that's because a company is an organism. It should be an organism. It should change and grow and shrink and spot opportunities to reach another kind of like, climatic condition, climax condition. So it grows. A company cannot sit there rigidly and say, this is what we do. It can sit there rigidly and say, this is why we do things. We do
Mm,
things because we believe in in finding truffles, finding things that no one else can see or think. We want to help people feel better about themselves. You can have that kind of purpose or why and change the how and the what of what you do. So absolutely. And if Shein or Coca-Cola or Kentucky Fried Chicken or any of Burger King, any of those companies are still doing in 20 years what they're doing now, I will be gobsmacked. They may be
mm.
delivering the same function or the same need to the customer, but they'll be doing something completely different. And if they're still doing it in 100 years, well, they'll either be dead or they'll be doing something different. And that, frankly, that's good, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it is. Um, you have I'm interested in it, just to quantify it for people. You have a figure I've heard you quoted. Obviously, it changes for the amount that you've saved the companies that you work with. Do you have it off the top of your head?
Yeah, $200 million a year.
And that it's what is, like, that's such a hard number
Huge.
to grasp. It's huge.
Yeah, it's
It's
absolutely
what.
huge. But you've got to remember, I've been working for 35 years. Every time I save money or carbon, I count it. And I've done that because I've had to justify my value as a consultant. People hate us, right? What do we
Mm,
say? We come in, we'd still their watch, and then we'll tell them the time when they ask us. That kind of statement is a lot of truth in that. But I have to be able to prove that I'm good at what I do. And my two metrics are money and carbon. And so every time I've saved my clients money or increased sales, I make a note of it. And sometimes I never know. So that's an underestimate. I can guarantee that. I did some work with, I won't name them. I did some work with a really interesting beer company, and I changed their bottle design. And I didn't know how much that was going to save them. So I'd never included any figures in my running mental tally of how much I've done. It's actually a spreadsheet. But I bumped into them at an event, and they were like, "Oh yeah, that saved us £1 million." Oh, okay. Why didn't you tell me that? And so I find it really useful to justify my impact, and it has to be ecology and economy. Has to be. And I don't charge a percentage. That would be the most sensible business decision I'd have ever made if I charged a percentage. Um, but I think to understand that whilst business has created most of the world's problems, it's going to be the thing that fixes them. That's a really contentious thing to say, but I am going to say that. It's really important to understand the power of enterprise, to understand the power of enterprise to lift people as well as reduce harm. That's really, really important. So I speak that language. I remember once I used to work with a consultancy in Wigan, and I used to work for a consultancy in Wigan for about a year. It was not for me, but they all talked about football like 24/7. It was actually quite tedious. Now I grew up playing rugby. I got to Leicester Tigers youth team level, and it was a working class sport in the Midlands. It wasn't what it is now, and so I could talk rugby all day long. I had to learn to talk football. I had to learn like stuff about clubs and grounds and away shirts and players and league positions. And I thought, okay, if that's what I've got to do to get to fit in, I will. And it was the same with sustainability. I have to meet people where they are. If I stand outside with a placard saying "Don't make anything, including money," we're not going to get anywhere. So I have to meet where they are. What I want to make is change, and what I want to do, how I want to do that, is by reducing the carbon intensity of everything that they make and the waste intensity of everything they make.
I should think you occupy quite an interesting position in terms of, because a lot of, everyone's on a greenness spectrum. Some people aren't, aware of it at all. Some people are very dark greens. And you're very aware, but you're probably speaking to people who are light green or not even on the spectrum. What do you think a lot of people who are in the world who are a green of whatever shade kind of miss or mistakenly communicate when they're speaking to people who aren't really on the spectrum?
It's so complex. This is I'm doing rabbit ears, inverted commas for those listening. Being green has become a way of kind of beating people down, looking down on people. I'm greener than you. Your behavior is not responsible. And I don't like that approach. We need to democratize this, not make it elitist. And the funding and the finance and stuff we're going to come on to in a minute, that's a massive issue, right? It's not a middle class concern. It's everybody's concern. But when we zip our self-worth and our ego into things, including how environmentally friendly we are and the products that we choose and trainers that we wear, the V trainer, which has got a horrific carbon footprint and don't last very long, by the way. But when we think we are better than other people because we've made a better choice, this sows division, not democratization. And I think it's a massive, massive issue. So what I often see is when you go to a public event and there's someone there from a company that is less easy to like, people ranting at them rather than listening to them. And you've got to do both. You've got to do both of those things. And I think many people in my sector fail at that first challenge of, okay, let's listen to them. There are many that also don't listen to the problems, don't voice you can't carry on killing people by putting sugar in plastic and sending it around the world. There are many people who don't take that step as well, and they become a sponge and they just become whatever the client wants them to be. But I think truly understanding the challenge that organizations face and what's needed to change them is really important. And this is particularly interesting in America, actually, because in America, your family's welfare and health is tied to your job. And that was designed purposefully. At the end of slavery, healthcare was a private thing that was tied to the employer, which is a form of slavery. It isn't. It's nowhere near as bad as slavery, clearly, but it's a form of control. And so
Mm.
we see people in American companies who are desperate to say something. They can't because they don't want to lose their job. Because if they lose their job, their kids, their partners, they will not have health, and they will not have health care. So I see, and it's the biggest break on innovation in the States. I mean, it's the single biggest, well, apart from gun ownership, problem with American community and civilization, if I'm honest. So I see a lot of people that want to do things but can't because they're trapped. Now, you often see that in the UK or in Europe where we have, universal free healthcare, which is frankly a human right. You often see that towards the end of someone's career because their focus is now shifted from healthcare towards pension, which is of course healthcare. Right. But they don't want to get the sack and lose their job at the very end of their career. And so you see a little bit of risk aversity. But then the last 2 years of their career, oh, they don't give a shit anymore. They've already done the numbers. That's when they become Jonathan Porritt and start campaigning with passion, right? So it's a really interesting challenge of how you can free up. And I've always found the rebels. I've always found the renegades within a business. They're the ones that bring me in because I am a little bit hard to employ, right? I say things that not everyone wants to hear, and my methods aren't, how shall we say, sterilized. Okay, I'm really happy to be quite a bit of a buccaneer. And I equally then find those people inside that like taking risks and want some excitement in their life. And so I'm very good at finding the wild ones, very good at finding the kind of the weird kids within an organization. And because that's what I am. And the risk is we will generate organizations with no space for weirdness. And I don't mean weirdness in terms of neurodiversity, but I do. I don't mean weirdness in terms of broader diversity, but I actually do mean those things. I really mean weirdness in terms of uniformity of thought and risk aversion. And I work in universities. I lecture at Loughborough in the School of Design. I think I do one lecture a year and one project a year. And I love it. I love working with them. They don't pay me, but I get paid in ways other than money, right? It's just brilliant to be around young people coming up with vibrant ideas. And I see these amazing people and they're all kooky and they've got kind of slightly what's the word, unflattering and slightly garish hairstyles, and I'm all right with that, right? I'll even take a mullet, although it's never suited anybody ever. I'll even take a mullet if it's on a young person. And um and they, and they towards the end of their final year they all begin to cut their hair and wear clothes that are a little bit preppy and look like they might be going to work for one of the big four accountancy companies. Then you've got the big four accountancy companies coming the other way, wanting to bring in some vibrant, funky thinking, and they walk past all these kids that look like them wearing Gant and go, well, "Where are all the weird kids?" Well, they're there. They've tried to look like you. And I'm not
Mm.
saying that when you join a big four company, big four accountancy company, they won't try and make you think like them afterwards, but they are at least looking for different talent. And so I
Mm.
think there's a real challenge that we will morph into the least offensive version of a winner of The Apprentice, and that fills me with abject fear.
I feel like the little synopsis that you gave of the different people at different stages of their career. If someone is, because I've met a few people who have either retreated from a career where they didn't feel like they could bring about the change that they felt needed to be, or are still in a career where they are the green insider and they want to be doing something, but they can't shake themselves because the box is so tight. What how would you work with those people in organizations, I would imagine, or that kind
Yeah,
of person, like
yeah, I do.
what do those people need to hear, or what do they need to do? Do they need to leave, or do they need to find new ways to grow in different ways?
Uh, Both. When a plant needs to grow, it either has to have a bigger pot, better nutrients, or more sunlight. And you can get all of those things by staying inside. Sorry, I've just realized my cat has just dropped a dead mole through the cat flap. Yeah, it's the second one in 2 days.
That was going to
I'm
be a
an
really good soundbite.
and that we can use that. I'm an ecologist, and I'm looking at it going, "Oh God, really?" So I'll go move that in a minute. Where was I? Oh yeah, a bigger pot, more nutrients, or more
Yeah.
light. And in an ideal world, an organization is flexible. A boss is. She's just moved it now. Where's that gone? A boss is flexible enough that she will see that the person growing will potentially grow taller than they are, and will free them up to do that. We'll see an opportunity to go, yes, and grow and go and fly. The problem we've had until now is bosses become fearful of the amazing talent that they've recruited because they think they'll take their job. And they manage them down. Now, as a renegade, as somebody in a business that is a little bit of an outlaw, that's the worst kind of boss you could have, one that has fear embedded within them. The best kind of boss you could have is one that says, well, one day you might be my boss, so I'm going to help you. That's exactly where we need to go. So you can do that by staying. And I'm not talked about sustainability yet. I will in a minute, I promise. You can do that by staying, or you can do that by leaving. The way that you take sustainability with you on that journey is you show people what the world would look like if they didn't. And I don't mean how much worse it would be. I don't just mean that. I mean how much you'll fall behind the consumer, how much you'll fall behind the competition. Those business metrics are really important. And then you show people how much better the world would be if we did do this. I've spent the last 35 years trying to scare people into behaving better by showing them how horrible it will be at 4 degrees warmer, which we will hit 4 degrees. There's no two ways about that. 1.5 is a dream, right? Imagine if I'd showed them how much better, fairer, and what's the word? How much more how much more, how much richer the world would be if we moved towards a regenerative economy. And this is a regenerative business. This is where we failed. We failed to throw imagination into sustainability. Instead, we've thrown constraint.
Hmm. You we mentioned earlier at the very start about like financial markets and shareholder and I'm interested in how you would apply what you've just said to that, the imagination and constraint. Like, is it that we need to rail against those exact systems, or that we need to figure out how we can fight the battle that we want to win within it? In your opinion?
Both. Yes, both.
Okay.
It's not one or the other. So, you're not going to rid the world of big organizations that people don't like. So you have to change them so that people are more accepting of what they do, and what they do is a constrained and a different world, a 4 degree warmer, a circular world, however we want to define what the future is going to be like. We have to change them, and we have to do that from the inside. And that's why I do what I do with the companies that I do it with. However, we also have to have a suite of businesses, of ideas, of communities ready to replace the trees that fall. And they will fall. Some of these big businesses, they will disappear. And they'll disappear not because they weren't good thinkers or good businesses. They'll disappear because they're not brave and they haven't understood the way the world's changing. And people use Toys R Us as an example all the time, and it's a great example. And I know they're back and they're online, but they're a great example of someone that could have had anything, and they had ended up with nothing. First mistake they made was to give all of the online merchanting rights to Amazon. They couldn't do it, so they rang Jeff and went, "Can you do this, Jeff?" And he was rubbing his hands, saying, "Yeah, well, while you're on my site, you'll be buying other things from me, right?" So they had no control over the major change in the way we buy. Secondly, they had all that retail space and they failed to grow a community. They just saw it as a boxes in, boxes out, money in challenge. they could have done anything. Imagine if they had, I don't know, if they had how to make your own slime, how to paint differently. Imagine if they turned it into a place where you could go and learn and meet other people. Dungeon Dragons workshops. These things are booming. Not even just on the back of Stranger Things. These things are booming. So imagine if they'd used that space to create community. So the fact that they didn't see that, that means that it's probably right that they went. Hard to
Mm.
hear as that may be. It's probably right because they hadn't. All creativity means is imagining a world that hasn't arrived yet, and they had failed to understand that the world that hadn't arrived yet wasn't the same as the world that they grew up in. And so, any business that fails to do that, and there's a sustainability lens on this, obviously, any business that fails to do that doesn't deserve to be here in 100 years.
That argument of if you don't adapt and change and in the scenario here become more sustainable, then you will get left behind is a nicely different to the we're all going to die or the other arguments. How which do you find, or do you find that there is one that is particularly convincing for the moment that you stand up in the boardroom and say, look, we actually need to do this and this, and it's maybe bigger than you thought, talking to the big clients that you work with? Do you find that is compelling?
I use both of them. I use a very
Okay.
gentle stick and a massive carrot. And
Hmm.
I'll show them a little video of the kind of interconnectedness of climate situations. I'll show them, where things are going dramatically wrong, and I'll do that in about 4 minutes, and then I'll spend 40 minutes helping them reimagine how the world could be. And that is much more aligned to what they know, which is we need to compete, to beat, we need to drag in new customers, we need to get return income. And I just change the lens on that and say, so how do we do that? Given that first 3 minutes, how do we do that? So that
Mm.
context is really important. But imagine a world that hasn't arrived yet, and your role in that. That's where people get really excited, unless they're towards the end of their career, and at that point they've stopped learning and stop. Not always. Many people have stopped learning and stopped growing, and they're on the. I always describe it as you're in a plane and you think, oh, we're going to crash. We're too high up. We're going to die. We're going to crash. We're only about 100 meters off the ground. We'll probably survive and glide. Probably be okay at this point. They're at that point. They're that close
Mm.
to retirement. And this is what frustrates me about the way we work today. Lots of things that frustrate me about the way we work, and we'll come to the Companies Act in a minute. But work, 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 stop. Stop. And what happens when you stop work? You get ill. You get bored. You don't have a name on your desk or a name on your door. You don't have people going, oh, did you hear what Jeff, what Altaf, what Cherie did? We don't have that self-worth that comes with the job. So we become depressed, and not always. And we become bored, and we become frustrated. And my view, and we die. Fundamentally, everyone that retires dies. So my view is don't retire, break the link, don't die. That's my plan. Don't retire,
And if you
don't.
don't retire, then you don't die.
That's my argument. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, I think having watched a lot of people retire and age, those that carry on working for as long as they can. My father-in-law's 80, and he's an electrician. And he's one of the only electricians in the country that can fix 1970s, 60s, 70s, and 80s sewing and knitting machines. That's his job. So they'll send a taxi from Glasgow to Leicester to pick him up to go and fix their machine. And they keep saying to him, do not, whatever you do, retire, because he is holding so many factories together. It's untrue. And he's the healthiest of all of the parents and parents-in-law and step-parents.
Mm.
He's the healthiest. So he's my role model. I'm just going to keep going. And also, there's no sell-by date on knowledge. We move through these different phases of life, and I always describe the first half or the first 2/3 of our life as acquisition. Pulling in all the
Mm.
experiences that we want, all the money, all the houses, all of the holidays, all of the partners. We acquire, we acquire, we acquire. And they become buttress roots to determine who we are, how we look, Oh, yeah, Jeff skis twice a year. All that kind of absolute rancid rubbish. And the second or the last third of our life, it's not about acquisition. It's like a river. It's about deposition. It's about becoming nobody by removing the buttresses and the judgment symbols of who you are and giving that information and that knowledge away. And in many communities, women play that role. That's why women generally live longer than men. When they stop being able to produce kids, they carry on raising kids as second, third tier grandparents, great grandparents. And I think we sometimes misunderstand our role in life. To hold that authority and that level of knowledge and to do nothing with it is criminal. So my gut instinct is we should be embracing the third age and asking what we can do for others. And I suspect we will live significantly longer, happier lives if we can continue to find some value or some purpose in that. That's not an environmental or a hippie thing. That's just oh my word, how do you stay mentally healthy longer?
It's interesting because I was on the phone to my mum yesterday, and she was like, "Oh, I've been selling some things out the loft so you don't have to clear them out when I'm gone." I was like, "Don't say it like that. That's so morbid." And she was like, "No, it's also because I as you're saying, in the latter part of your life, you want to offload things because your identity isn't intertwined with it." And I think it would be nice in a way if we could realize that earlier, and not need so much of the maybe in terms of possessions, especially like the high accumulation phase, to have the high the steep decumulation phase. That'd be quite nice.
Rapid deposition, because
Rapid
you know what?
definition.
When a river becomes mature and it drops its sediment, it creates the most fertile floodplains. That's like nature. And these phases in life, they're really interesting. And I often mirror them to the phases that I've seen my customers, my clients go through. And I'm 57. I've been working for 35 years. I was doing sustainability before it was a cool thing to do, and now it's obviously a fucking hot thing to do. But I've been doing it for all that time. And when I started, it was really interesting. You'd go into a company and you'd be asked, "Oh, Mark, you do sustainability, don't you? Can you help keep me out of prison?" Yeah, I can do that. Let's stop doing bad things. And then it was difficult economic times, right? So, Mark, you do sustainability. Can you help keep me lean? Yeah, I can do that because sustainability, economy, ecology, put less in. You're going to save money, right? And then it was, Mark, you do sustainability. Can you keep me out of the papers because they're a bit rabid on polluters now? Wonder why that might be. And then it was, Mark, you do sustainability. Can you keep me risk-free? This is when we were moving into supply chain control and increased legislation. And then it was, Mark, can you keep me supply chain compliant? Can you help me with REACH? Can you help me with those other legislations? And then it became, you do sustainability. Can you help me look like I care? The era of brand. Help me look like I care. Let's look at one thing. Let's turn all of our old toys from a fast food chain into trays. You're still putting down the Amazon. Right? That's a shit project. Let's go to the nub of the issue. But can you help me look like I care? And then it became, Mark, you do sustainability. Can you keep me ahead of my competitors? And that's that beautiful shift that we saw in Simon Sinek from start with why into the kind of like everlasting company. You're not there to beat your competition. You're there to outlast your competition. And then it became, and this was mainly during lockdown, Mark, you do sustainability. Can you help me care more? And that was when you had to demonstrate the business benefits of a purpose-driven business, which is, they're clear. And now it's not that. Now it's, Mark, you do sustainability. Can you help me stay relevant to my customers? And can you help me attract and retain the best talent in the world? And whilst that's been checked a little bit by Drill Baby Drill, the old, Cheeto-coloured president, that has definitely had an impact. He's not got long left, right? One way or another. And consequently, we will see a flip back in the other direction. So we're likely to see a significant interest in the next 5 years to take us back to where we were before all that nonsense began.
Do you think that's still going to be the case with the rise of Farage here in the UK?
How political can I get? I think populism and the rise of the right is incredibly dangerous in so many ways, because it's talking about creating enemies out of things that aren't bad. It's talking about demonizing woke, which, as far as I'm aware, being woke means caring more for people, caring more for the planet, and being a nicer person. And as Kathy, oh, what's her surname? Kathy Burke said, "I'd rather be woke than be a twat." Excuse my swearing. It's a quote, it's a direct quote. And she's absolutely right. It's the problem we have is a massive proportion of the population have been left behind for lots of reasons, socially or economically, and they blame what they see as the progressive left or wokeness as the reason for them being left behind. And they've really been left behind because politically, we've actually forgotten to bring them with us. Bear with me. It's going to get a bit dark for a moment. I know that's not going to help anyone watching, but I've just heard my daughter. There you go.
Oh,
I've just heard my daughter come home and the dogs are going to kick off big time. So I need to just, there you go. That's what we want. It's like having an evening story with Uncle Mark now. and so I think populism has significant threats. And I worry about how we can bring, people are not necessarily bad. They're not. But what they are is they misunderstand what's causing them harm, and they're frightened. So how we change that, I think, is one of the abiding challenges of our time. So will that slow down this return to a more, how do I say this without being elitist, a civilized, fairer way of living and working? Yeah, it's bound to slow it down. Will it win? No. Bad never wins. I was desperately trying to avoid a massive dog introduction.
yeah, don't worry. So you went through a really interesting journey of, Mark, you work in sustainability, can you? And then insert. And you said what it is at the moment, but what do you think it will change into? And what do you think the catalyst for that changing into the difference of, Mark, can you help me to, will be?
That's a brilliant question. That's the best question I've ever been asked in a podcast. So I really appreciate that. I think it will be around, how do you build a business that is fit for 20, 30, 40 years and that is AI proof? And I don't mean that in as I don't like AI. I do. It's incredible. It does more good than harm, but it's going to do some harm. And so how we build a business for a world that hasn't arrived yet means that we have to understand the world that hasn't arrived yet. And sustainability is a massive set of constraints. Climate is huge challenge. How do you grow food when you've got compression of the climatic zones and growing ocean acidification and increasing aridity right the way through the bottom of Spain? How do we do that? They're brilliant questions. So how do we stay relevant, ahead, and future-proof, not just in terms of technology, but in terms of all of the moving parts? And that's going to be really, really challenging. The easiest way of dealing with that is the AI side of things. So we can use AI in a really positive way. We can use it in an incredibly positive way to predict climate, to change watering and growth patterns, but it will ultimately reduce headcount. There's no two ways about that. What do we do with all that time? How does a business morph into one that can support people who don't have the same level of income and who don't have the same lifestyle as they have now? These are the challenges that we face, and they're absolutely huge. And I don't have all the answers to that, Rob, but that's where I want to That's where I want to sit right now, is how do we build that world?
Do you feel like there's that's the, I really like that firstly, but I sometimes wonder whether the almost rallying and visionary painting of the picture of the future is distracting us from something that is like, no, would somebody in 2020 or 2022 have thought that the rolling back of the green agenda would be so huge and so like attacked with such ferocity? And I feel like I wonder, or the pessimistic part of me wonders whether how realistic that is.
Would
Do
somebody?
you?
That's a great question. You're really good at this. Would somebody in 2020 or 2022 have predicted the sudden decline of people caring? No.
Mm,
It was a surprise. I knew it was coming. You probably knew it was coming, but the vast majority of people didn't know it was coming. You've got to. I knew Brexit was going to happen because of where I lived and the conversations I was having in the pub. I could feel this festering anger that felt it was not about Europe. It was not about Europe, and this is not about sustainability. Everybody wants a safer world for their children. This is about trust and science and who to believe. This is about a dogma. So will it reverse? Yes, I feel confident it will reverse, but we're going to have to need to see problems first. It's like when you want to put a zebra crossing on a road, or you want to remove like really bad parking on a road, and you talk to the highways authority, and they say, "Well, no one's died yet." And then I say, "Okay, so my nan's 93. Do you want me to volunteer her? If you have a death, will that help? That would help. That would help." Brilliant. And we're in that. We're in the highways authority, the highways department conundrum with climate change. We're going to need to see that it's too late before we do something too late. And that's horrible, right? And in the UK, we're probably going to be okay. Might get a bit colder over time, weirdly, but we're probably going to be okay. If I was living in Bangladesh, I'd be shitting myself right now. I would
mm,
be absolutely shitting myself right now. So I am ultimately hopeful, Rob, that we will do something and the society will change when they begin to see this. We have bad actors. We have politicians. I'm going to use politicians because I don't think they are. I think they're greedy individuals. Maybe that's how all politicians have been that always. I don't know. But we have politicians who have got the ear of the masses because they appear to be on their side while simultaneously planning to privatize the health service, row back on any social care, which we will all need at some point, because we've made an enemy of certain groups of people and certain ways of thinking that are not really enemies at all. They're focusing their guns on the wrong people. But what they have got is the ability to change minds and perceptions on a scale that our traditional politicians have completely underestimated. And for every Farage, we see a Green Party, right? And
mm.
for every right, we will see a left. And the left, and when I say the left, I actually mean moderates. Like I'm not far left at all, but I do believe in a fairer society, a society that is for the many, not the few. And we are seeing some reaction to this creeping nationalism. And it's so easy to confuse these issues. We think we're patriots when we're jingoists. We're not
What's a
waving our
jingoist?
jingo, like shouting Britain's best.
Oh, okay.
We are. Frankly, jingoism is the bit before racism. I've forgotten my train of thread. Oh yeah, we're not waving.
Sorry.
We're not seeing flags waved with pride. We're seeing them waved with prejudice. And
Mm.
Pride and Prejudice are so, as Jane Austen knew, so closely related and so easy to confuse. And we need, oh God, we need to change the way that we're educating our population because we've done everyone a disservice, frankly, and that's allowed these people in.
So on the, I guess, education of population, if you were to have, and this is a question stolen from Tim Ferriss, but if you were to have a billboard that was displayed everywhere in the world to every person, and it only had, space for, say, 10 words or under, and you were trying to get across that message, what would you write on it?
That's a great question. I would write, for the many, not the few, and you are the many. I think it's really interesting listening. I've got friends who are absolutely up in arms about the recent budget. They're millionaires. They're millionaires, these people. They're able to spend months doing extreme adventures that other people can't do. They own businesses where the ratio of the lowest salary to the highest salary is astronomically different. And they're livid and they're thinking of moving. And great. We can manage without those tax dollars because they were already reduced due to a range of offshore investments. I think we need to understand that we are not the few. We are the many, and we're all in this together. There's another one we could use, right? It's a little bit High School Musical, but we could print, we're all in this together. That's another billboard that I'd like to see. And I wonder how this division has grown so tangible, has become so, it's almost invisible. It's creeping. It's a creeping division where you just have a sense of which side of the fence you sit. And that's often driven, I think, by jealousy and misunderstanding.
I kind of want to leave the words of that ringing in someone's ear and end it there. But I do really want to ask, what do you wish more people asked you?
What do I wish more people ask me? They ask me what I do. They don't ask me why I do it. They don't ask me why I do it. They don't ask me what it was in me that stopped me going to university to study law and held me back to go and study environmental science.
I studied law. Mistake.
And you can be an amazing ethical lawyer, right? No two ways about that. But I just saw so much inequity in the geophysical world. I looked around and saw, and it was driven by my interest in apartheid and the unfairness of the South African system. And then that moves into, understanding the long half-life of the Commonwealth and the East India Company, and the extraction of value traditionally has always come at somebody else's cost. And what I noticed was that somebody else was also the planetary systems and stability. And there is no business if there is no planetary stability. And the same people that had everything taken from them were also in those parts of the world that were going to be subject to planetary instability first. And that's why I did sustainability as a thing. And so I wish people asked me why I did what I did as much as what it is. What is it you actually do, Mark? My mum had this moment of absolute clarity when I was head of sustainability for ASDA, which was just over a year. And it was
in the PR department.
Yes, exactly. I was based in the PR team as head of sustainability, and it was the most dreadful period. I've never felt as lonely, surrounded by as many people. And but she knew exactly what I did. And when people asked her what I did, she goes, "Oh yeah, he's head of sustainability at ASDA." People go, "Oh, can you have a word with him about this packaging?" Right? Like, it was like absolute 100% clarity on what I did. And I'm not saying my mum doesn't understand; she really does. But from as a totem for the general public, there's some clarity there. So I get asked what I do a lot, and it's hard to explain sometimes. Why I do it is much easier to explain, and that's around inequity. We all have a voice, including the planet, and it needs lifting.
Thank you very much, Mark. I've really, really enjoyed this.
It's fabulous. You ask fucking great questions. I was really thrilled with that. The only
Thank you
research,
very
the only
much.
prep I did was on my 100K, my million, and my billion. And I thought, fucking hell, that's a great question. So I kind of put something together on that, but I'm really happy to leave that exactly where it is.
Okie dokie. Thank you very much.
Thank you.